Welcome, everyone. I hope you're having a good week and have had a productive week. And thank you for being with us today for our third series. We have 3 series, and we're at the last one of our 3. So some of you I know have been with us on all 3 series and sessions. Thank you very much for taking time out to be with us. And for anyone who's joining us for the first time, welcome. Our series has been on bringing people along on the journey of excellence. And we have been talking about how we set the stage for engaging our people in the meaningful work that we do and what that means. And today we're going to talk about engaging meaningful conversations and paying ridiculous attention to others. I always have a guest with me, and today Brent Brummet, one of our coaches, will join me later on in the session. And so I look forward to connecting with Brent as we move forward with our session today. So let me start, as I always have with these sessions, with the wheel that we have developed. And I had mentioned, I think last time, that this wheel was recently developed because I get the question quite often, how do you bring people along with you? And so I had bulleted points of what my thoughts were about how you bring people along. And then I took those bulleted points and created a wheel that I think is meaningful to how we think about that and the components of bringing people along. And there are 5 keys, and we've talked about 3 of them, and we're going to talk about the last 2 today. And we started with harvesting wins and recognizing the bright spots every day. And what we talked about was making sure that first and foremost, that we look at what's right out there and that we know why things are working and we're recognizing those. One of the things that I think is really important is when we're building those recognitions, we can connect those recognitions to the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And we can also connect those recognitions to the behaviors. You know, I think about just in general, one of our last sessions with our whole team, there are a couple of people that I recognize, and I recognize Kathy Miles, a coach on our team, because one thing that Kathy does is she's always positive. For one, I can always count on Kathy to be positive. But even as we're solving problems, Kathy's always pulling the things out that we can look at it from a perspective that keeps the energy going. And as I was talking about something very specific, I was recognizing Kathy for how she does that, because that's a behavior that's very specific that helps our team move forward. And it helps give people specific and timely information that helps people understand what helps our team move forward and what brings people along. The other things that we talked about were providing a clear direction and then reviewing the brutal facts. I've always known, and I think you would agree with me, that when people have a clear direction, where they know where we're headed, and we've communicated that and they understand that, for the most part, they want to come with us. And so when we bring people along, part of bringing people along is helping them understand what's working, which we have evidence of, and then what's not working and how we face the brutal facts. So people don't expect to hear good news all the time. And when we share the transparent information of areas that aren't working so well, what I find is people really want to get involved and help because they want to be on a winning team and they want to help us achieve those outcomes. So we've talked about the combination of those 3 things and hardwiring some of the behaviors that attach to that in our organizations help bring people along. And so today, when we think about facing the brutal facts and engaging in conversations, it's not just about sharing the facts and being transparent. Transparency is about how we engage people in meaningful conversations around that data, and then pay attention, ridiculous attention, to what they're saying so that we can do something with that information and connect it back to what we hear so that people understand that their input makes a difference. And so today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about strategies and tactics and tools. So how can we pull some of the key tactics that we do, some of our most popular tactical things that we do that help us engage in meaningful conversations and bring people along by paying ridiculous attention. So as we move forward, what we'll see is that as we look at some of the tactics, the one thing that we'll focus on first are huddles. So I wanted to pull this piece up because I want you to see, I'm going to be very tactical today. I'm going to talk about huddles. I'm going to talk about purposeful rounding conversations and then what we do with follow-up information. And then Brent and I are going to role play rounding with purposeful rounding so you can see that in action. And so when we think of team huddles, that's become really popular for us. And it really came out of COVID because as a team, our virtual teams, we were trying to figure out how we make sure we stay connected to each other and continue positive momentum to achieve results. And a huddle is that face-to-face meeting. It can be in person or virtual. It's very specifically focused on a short period of time where we always begin with a positive and end with a positive. And then we're looking at something in the middle where we're looking at our data and analyzing our data and testing if we're stuck or not, and looking at what we're doing in the next set of time, that short period of time, to help our team continue to stay focused, engaged on a very specific outcome that we're trying to achieve and a problem we're trying to solve. So our huddle agenda is answering these questions. What's up between now and the next huddle? What are the results, the daily, weekly, monthly metrics? But mainly we're looking at short periods, small bites of data in short time periods where we're really focused on, with high attention on the information that's there. And we are engaging people in that data and conversations. And then we're going around with our leadership team and that small team of asking, are we getting stuck and where are we getting stuck? We're not here at the huddles to solve the problem. We're here to identify where we are getting stuck. And then we move out from those huddles to look at areas where we need to solve problems and do deeper dives into those problems that inform us so that we're proactive in our approach instead of reactive. We're always putting the information in front of us so that we can act on it rather than feel like we're lagging behind and something's being pulled forward in that lagging way. So team huddles really gives us an opportunity to bring our teams together to engage in conversations around very small tidbits of information and data to continue to move forward. And I'll show you, we'll play out that scenario and show you what that looks like in just a minute. The other tactic or strategy that I believe is really important, what we know is that rounding conversations are one of our most critical tactics that help get results. It's one of our most popular. And we usually talk about it in terms of relationship rounding and purposeful rounding. So as we're staying focused on setting clear direction, looking at the brutal facts, looking at the data points that are meaningful, and then using those data points to engage in meaningful conversations and paying ridiculous attention to what we hear to move to action, purposeful rounding becomes really critical in that approach. So if we're really focused on something very specific and we're building our huddles, team huddles around that, we can also have those one-on-one conversations with the people who are key to implementing actions that are helping us try to build those improvements and outcomes. So we're asking our rounding questions in a very purposeful way around that action, around that strategy. What's worked well when we've implemented whatever it is that we're implementing? How do you know? What's been most significant in terms of the challenges? And how do we know that? How do you know that that's most significant challenge? Who has implemented what we're doing really well? What did they do? Let's talk about that. And then how can I be helpful to you as we continue to focus on this particular strategy that we're moving forward with? So these questions really help us get at the very specific problem around that direction and the transparent information that moves us forward with those meaningful conversations. Huddling is around team conversations about looking at where we're stuck to continuously solve problems. Purposeful rounding or one-on-one conversations that are helping us get at where we need to provide the best help and where we can gather that information from the individuals who are key and on the ground implementing those strategies that are so key to helping us achieve the outcomes. So let's go ahead and look at then how do we put those two pieces together? So I'm going to bring Brent on to our session with us today, and we will move forward with looking at the scenario that Brent and I will play on. So Brent, hope to have you with me as we join today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Janet. Good to see you.
You too. So here's the scenario, and Brent, you and I have gone over it, and we're going to role play a little bit, and then we'll come out of role play and we'll talk about what we've learned here. So our scenario is we're focusing on student attendance as a key outcome to improve. And we've implemented morning huddles, just in the format that we talked about before. We've implemented morning huddles, let's say on Tuesday and Friday of each week. And we're doing that with our middle school principals because we're applying specific strategies to help us improve attendance. And we're going to talk about those strategies and how they're working around data at those huddles. So that's what we have moved forward with. And so at the huddles, as we review the daily attendance at the school and classroom level, we're also looking at the stoplight results by classroom and then by student in that classroom. So I think you can begin to see what those huddles look like. Very specific, small bits of information that we can have conversations around stoplighting to know exactly where our problems are. So at the end of the first 30 days, I'm decided as the person who leads the middle school principals that I'm going to round with the principals to get a sense of how it's going for them. So we've had the huddles, but I want a touch point with the individuals in terms of how it's moving forward and applying purposeful rounding and doing that. So Brent and I are going to step out of our character a little bit, and we're going to get into a character of me being the supervisor and Brent being a middle school principal. So we will move into that role play. Brent, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for being part of the huddles as we're really trying to focus on our school attendance problem. I just appreciate the time that you're spending with me today because I want to get to know a little bit more about your thoughts and your input here. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
It's good. So let's start, like we always do, Brent, when we start with rounding. I'm going to do a little bit of purposeful rounding on what we're looking at in the huddles. So as we think about it, what's working well with how we're looking at the data and we're looking at them in our huddle formation.
Yeah, when I think about that, there's two things that really come to mind for me. One is that intentionality of staying focused on this. As principals, there are so many things on our plates, and we can say we're going to attempt something, but really seeing this meeting every 2 times a week and really talking about this gives us that focus, and measuring that data and all the way down to the student has been excellent. When we're having the conversations in the huddle, hearing what other principals think and say, what they're learning from their data, actions they're taking, is helpful for all of us. One of the principals talked about is that they really outlined to the students what the expectation is. So the students know what good attendance looks like. So being able to have that conversation and think about, we're measuring, are our students invested in this as well? Do they know what good attendance looks like? So it's been very helpful.
Yeah, I really love that, Brent, because what we're seeing is just that natural cascading of information to the student, because we're doing it because we're trying to get to that outcome. So we're really trying to gather that information to build better understanding, and that's how I think as you're looking at that data, the data just helps you know what's working, what's not working very specifically.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the challenges. As we've gone through our first 30 days, what are the challenges that you're facing?
Well, I think a major challenge in the huddle, principals are prone to be problem solvers. We want to solve the problem, right? We're asked all the time. So we want to solve problems right away. So in those huddles, we could easily get distracted by something that may be standing in our way and want to have a lot of opinions or statements about that. But remembering that we're all identifying those roadblocks and then taking them back to our teams. So using that time well and not getting stuck there has been something that we're growing in. And
Yeah.
I also think another thing is that desire to be perfect and realizing that this is a place where we're learning. We're learning and we grow while we're learning. So that's been a challenge, but very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's so good because one of the things as we've gone in the first 30 days, we're trying to get in that rhythm of the huddles. But we've had, I think you're right. We've had to pull out of that rhythm because it's also part of the learning. Because you're right, we're problem solvers. We're ready to get to the answer and get it to the get to the outcome pretty quickly. But I just appreciate you and what you've done in terms of that learning and being helpful in that regard. Have you noticed as you think about what we've witnessed in the first 30 days, has there been anyone in particular that's done something especially well, that I always like to send a note out and recognize people?
Yes, I have a guidance counselor, Miss Jackson, who really has been very purposeful about this, reached out to families, made connections. But even more than that, she helps us to celebrate the individual student. So when we have a success, maybe a student who's been out for a while now is coming back, and we're seeing that from chronic absenteeism, she elevates those names so we can celebrate with the child. So we're not just talking about percent of student, but we're really celebrating our students and their progress. She's excellent.
Yeah. Thank you. And I just go back to something that's been a theme in what we're saying, Brent. One is you talked about how it's really getting to the students, and the students are even taking ownership because we're looking at that data and that data is just naturally flowing to others. The same with the guidance counselor, right? I mean, so it's not just us taking the data and looking at it in the huddles, but because we're looking at that, it's just naturally being part of conversations, engaging people in meaningful conversations around that data so that they can act on it. And I think what I'm hearing from you, which I think is really the purpose of this, is it's helping them become more engaged and to act in ways that just that they feel like they're also part of that team and being able to help solve some of the issues that are there.
Right. Ownership, excitement. It's, very powerful.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I'll end with, as I always do, is there anything I can do to be helpful to you as we continue with our huddles and looking at student attendance?
I really appreciate you allowing us to have this space and your encouragement always to be honest, to really be honest. And so I really appreciate that environment and that culture that you're creating for us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and if there's anything I can do more or any way that we can make the huddle better, as we move along, it's our first 30 days, we're learning together, but seeing, really good progress. So, thank you very much. Thank you for your time today and the input that you provided. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll pull out of our role play. So Brent, before we leave this, as you think about that conversation, you've been a middle school principal, think about, what is that, what does a conversation like that mean for a leader?
Yeah, that is such a great question. I've thought about this I used to say that when you're a principal, it feels like that you get together at the beginning of the year and the admirals all tell you where you're going, and then you as the captain of your ship are set out to sea for that year. But having those kind of conversations ties you back to the overall purpose. And it's that feeling of being seen, being connected, and that feeling of that you're an important part of what is happening. So
Yeah.
it's very valuable.
Yeah. And that's so when we're talking today about our theme, meaningful conversations, paying attention, it's not just I'm going down and reading the questions and you getting your answers and saying, see you, but it really is engaging in those conversations, listening to you, probing, taking that back. And, as we think about how we bring people along, the huddles and the way we engage and the coupled with the purposeful rounding conversations really gives us a pretty, not to say, anytime I say easy, it's not that means it's easy to do, but it's not hard to understand. And to do those two key things really help us bring people along.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank
Brent,
you.
I thank you so much for doing the role play with me, and thank you for what you do. So the third, I said there were three. So we've got huddles, rounding, purposeful rounding conversations. And the third piece is then what do you do with that information? And so I just want to connect you pretty quickly to our 3-2-1 reflection tool. Sometimes we can use a stoplight report. Sometimes we can simplify what we get from the rounding conversations into a follow-up. This is the follow-up. So we've heard information. Let's say I've rounded with all of the principles. I'm compiling information. And so what we really focus on is the 3-2-1, three things: working well, wins that we can share with others, the two follow-up actions, based on what we see are the challenges and barrier, and what's the one action step we're going to take for a very short period of time from those purposeful rounding conversations. And so we just do 3 to 3 wins to 2 actions to 1 action step within a defined time period. And it would probably be for us in 30 days. So we'll do the 30 days weekly, 2 times a week for the huddles. Every 30 days, do a touch point purposeful rounding conversation, and then use this simple tool of 3 wins, 2 actions, 1 action step for that 30-day period. Concise, simple in terms of thinking, clear in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, and building that continuous improvement process in a consistent way that helps us engage people in conversations and paying attention to them, because the follow-up tool really helps people understand that we're paying attention to them and they can see their input into the tool of the follow-up tool so that they understand what they do matters. So again, huddles connected to purposeful rounding with a follow-up tool of a 3-to-1 reflection tool, something that you can take away today to implement around small bits of data around one outcome that leads to what we're trying to achieve overall, but we're pulling one outcome that we know can make a big difference with tiny bits of data, building those continuous improvement processes around the huddle as a platform to help us do that. So as we continue and summarize today, when I think about, in most all of what we do, for those of you that know us well, we're always assessing, collecting data, and it's not just about data, for taking the data and looking at the data. But what's most important to us is having conversation around data and then acting on it. Having that conversation around the data, aligned to the data points, and acting on it. And what today we've talked about is tiny pieces of data that will make a meaningful impact, and something that people can do because it helps us provide clarity around and transparency through that engagement to action. And so when we think about what we're doing, is we're building an emotional bank account with our people, and we're bringing people along by acting on that wheel, and we're continuously harvesting those wins. We're building that emotional bank account. At some point, there's going to be a change process where we have to cash in. And so if we haven't built that emotional bank account by being very intentional with our strategies that align to that wheel, it's very difficult for us to be able to make those difficult decisions because we don't have the emotional bank account in place. And so really what we've talked about is, with the emotional bank account, is we're showing gratitude. We're capitalizing on the wins. We're specifically recognizing people and the bright spots around the gratitude that we show for the accomplishments that we have. We're providing feedback. We're using tools to provide feedback, constant feedback, even if the feedback and the information that we have is not always what we want to see. it's the transparency of that information and the conversations connected to that with our teams that help us build that momentum and bring people along. It's also a personal connection. Rounding conversations help us make that one-on-one personal connection. I can't stress this enough, how important it is to have those personal connections with people as they're making changes and implementing the things that are so significant to us to achieve results. And we also, at the basics of what we're trying to do, is we're reducing the barriers, we're looking at the challenges and reducing the barriers for our people so that they can basically help move us forward, help implement the things that are needed in order to move our districts and our schools and our classrooms and our students forward in a way that is significant. And by doing that, at the end of the day, we're reducing people's anxiety. They have clarity in the direction. They want to face the brutal facts so that they can do something about that. And they know that we're going to engage them in conversations and pay attention to what they say and recognize the things that are working and act on those that we need to improve. That's how we bring people forward. I appreciate the last 3 sessions that I've had the opportunity to lead with you all. I hope that you've gotten something from these. This is the wheel of how we bring people along. And so I hope that as we have talked about the very specific tactics and strategies and talked about what that looks like in each part of the wheel, that you can go out and apply some of those strategies that will make a difference in your organizations. And so thank you for being with us for the last 3 sessions. So as we close today, we can continue our conversation. Our next opportunity for continuing is for you to join us at our annual conference, What's Right in Education. I can't believe it. We're here in October. It's hard to believe we are in October, but it's not that far away. October 22nd through the 24th in Westminster, Colorado, right outside the Denver area. And we'll have our partner organizations talking about some of the work that they do, the way that they apply the wheel, the way they bring people along, the way they engage people in meaningful conversations, looking transparently at what's working and what's not working, and how they begin to move forward toward building improvements within their organization. If you can join us, there's a link here. Please join us. We'd love to have you there. And for those of you that are going to be there, I can't wait to see you very soon in the next several weeks. And the last thing I'll say in terms of closing is most of what we talked about, all of what we talked about is in the book Hardwiring Excellence in Education that I had the opportunity to write and was published last spring or a year ago spring. And today what we focused on were some of the tactics and Principle 5 focused on employee engagement in Chapter 5 and communicate at all levels, or our team huddles and our 3-to-1 tools. There are many more tools within the book that you can have resources to, and that hopefully will be helpful to you as you continue your leadership journey in the organizations that you work with. I thank you so much for the time that you've given us. Appreciate the work that you do each and every day to create the places where we honor the people who come to work and work with us and engage them in conversations that help them be better at what they do and become the best at what they do. And when we do that, we make students and help students become the best at what they're able to do and to help them to succeed. That's what we're all about. We're lucky and to be in this profession. And I spend each and every day with the honor and being part of your organizations to help lead that way. Together, we continue to make our profession one of the greatest professions out there. Thank you all.